What happens after you die? What happens to your body? You could choose to be buried or cremated, or you might just decide to give your body away, to donate it to medical science and education.
When you die, your body's not any use to you any more than your old clothes, so you might as well let somebody make some use out of it. You've finished with it.
Every year, a tiny number of people leave precise instructions to gift their entire corpse to medicine. It's rarely discussed, never seen, and it challenges traditional attitudes about death or what happens after death.
I feel they were no longer in the body, their soul had gone.
And the need for new donors is constant.
When they said to me he would be residing in Trinity, I thought that is brilliant.
In the anatomy department at Trinity College in Dublin, the body donor team can never know who their next donor will be or when they will arrive. And they can never forget about the grieving families. The donor bodies are crucial for medical research and the education of every new batch of students.
I've never seen a dead body before.
It's a vital and unavoidable part of studying medicine.
And now, who wants to make the first incision?
These people are letting you look inside them.
Every September, 12 new donors are brought out to play their part in the students' education. And at the end of the academic year, just like the students, they will get to go home.
In a way, he's still around. I'm just loaning him for a little while.
This is the gentleman who 6 months ago or so, he had an injury to the back of his 3 fingers from a bandsaw. So he cut the extensor tendons, the tendons that straighten your fingers. So his tendons were repaired, and the downside of that is that the tendon repair, or the scar in the tendon, can stick to the underlying bone, especially when there's been a fracture there. So what I'm trying to do here is to just free up his tendons from the underlying bone, and hopefully that he'll be able to bend his fingers in more. As a student, you weren't really allowed to cut anything, except for in cadavers, okay? But I certainly remember my first day in the anatomy lab. It's a bit daunting, because, you know, you're young, 17 or 8, well, probably about 18 when I was in first med, and stitch again. Yeah, it's scary to start with. I think it was the first time I'd ever seen a dead person. But it's treated with respect, and the lecturers and everything were very good. But what you gain there is just enormous in terms of being able to see the anatomy for yourself rather than just read it out of books. And certainly when I was in college, there were no computers or anything like that, or animations or anything like that. There was just two-dimensional textbooks from which we learnt. And I can't remember, did we even wear gloves then? That might sound really strange at this stage, but that was in 1977, 70, so, which we probably did wear gloves, but I'm not sure.
Okay, you're going to need gloves, guys. Okay, so let's talk about that, the pectoral region. If it's coming from here and it's attaching to the arm, what does it do? What's its function? Pec major.
This is the cords here, so relative to where the artery is, this is the lateral cord.
I love anatomy lab. It is definitely, it makes anatomy more real, like it kind of makes it come alive. which sounds a bit weird to say, but it's definitely the best way for learning.
So far we've been on the upper limb. So we started with the pectoral region in around the breast and then moved into the back, working all the way down through the forearm into the hand.
Okay, the median nerve. How are we going to know that the median nerve is the median nerve other than?
So what is the group of nerves that these nerves come from? What's that plexus of nerves called? Brachial plexus. Can you show us the brachial plexus?
Never really knew how many muscles there were in just that part of your arm. You know, it's mental. And just to learn about all those things and where they go and how they work. And that's why once you're working with the donors for a while, you realise why donors are still used, and there's no way you could build a machine that could even come close to the texture and the size of different parts of the body.
So how do you double check and make sure that it's the ulnar nerve? Yeah, so follow it through the arm, and how are you going to identify that's ulnar? What's the best way?
You know what a bicep looks like, but until you put your fingers in between the two heads, that's when, like, all right, now you won't forget it. You know what's there, and I mean, it's really important.
My donor's got a really, really cool thing. He's got 3 heads on his pec major. Normally they only have 2 heads, so it's an anomaly, and we're all like, oh, come look at our donor. He's got 3 heads, and like we're like so proud of him almost. It's cool.
Then your radial artery.
My donor, for example, is a very lean individual. So when we were looking at biceps brachii, he's got like a pretty large muscle and very, very little fat or adipose tissue. So I just like to think like he must have been, you know, really sporty or something. Like, I think it helps me to think about that, and then visiting the other donor tables, you kind of wonder like what was their life like, because their bodies do look very different.
If I have a doctor working on me, I certainly want them to know what they're doing. And if they can't practice what they're doing when they're training, they won't be as skilled as medical personnel.
He definitely tried to keep me busy. He gave me 4 sheets of meticulously typed notes on what he wanted done with all his various things. This is all his X-rays, which I'm bringing into the anatomy department in Trinity, so that the students can see really what was happening to him, and it might help them understand the progression maybe of his illness. I'm sure they'll probably find it quite helpful. It's not as though I need to go in to feel near to him. He's all around me here in my home. And today will be the first day that I do that. I'll see how it goes. I've been very fortunate in having, a very, very supportive family. Hello, how are you? Hi. Nice to see you. So good you could come see you. Hi, Siobhan. How are you doing?
You're great. You're fantastic.
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
Hi, I'm Siobhan.
Hi,
Carol. Carol, hello. Hilary, how are you? Lovely to meet you.
Okay, thank you.
This is
It's beautiful.
We'd always thought it would be nice if families could follow the coffin into the college. And in our old anatomy building, that wasn't possible. We said, well, if the one thing we're going to get is going to be a relatives' room, that relatives can come in and just be in the building and in a very close to where their loved one is going to reside for the next couple of years.
Beautiful, actually, yeah. So that's it.
Oh,
that's one of our...
Oh, gosh, I mean, that's
oh,
just...
my goodness.
I mean, I just remember him so well when you see that.
I'd say that's probably how you remember him, all right.
That's actually how I remember him.
So, and as I say, that's all his X-rays and stuff, because I reckon that they will help the students very much.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, his blood donor card.
When we were doing the preservation.
Doing the preservation, we were saying,
yeah.
you know, we were there saying, Morris, it's hard for us to have you here.
Yeah.
We have to get on and do what we have to do.
Right, he said,
And,
right,
you
we'll
know,
get to it.
you can nearly hear him saying,
yeah, go
exactly,
ahead.
that's what you're supposed to do.
And then everything worked out so well with the embalming and the perfusion, and Siobhan said, just in depth like you were in life.
Right.
Always helping, you know, just so everything was so easy.
Good.
And it makes it easier for us and,
yes.
and I mean useful for the students obviously as
Yeah.
well. You know, it's just he's going to be well cared for here. He has a lot of attention.
We know that, yes, we know that. I mean, it's like family, to be honest, you know, that he's in here. I feel that he's with family anyway, you know, so I don't mind.
Certainly
I
is.
don't mind.
We feel that. There's always that side of, you know, being approachable and then the professional distance, and I think it's very much so when it comes to the family and their bereavement. When we meet the relatives in the relatives' room, it can be quite stressful at times because you can almost feel their anxiety and their bereavement, and it has been difficult in the last, since we got the relatives room with more time with the relatives than we had before, but it's also an opportunity for us to give more support to the relatives, just to make them feel that they're with people who know how they feel, almost because we've all had bereavements in our lives.
And yet I had spent my time with him.
Well, you have a sense that she's still around. I was in Trinity actually the other day because we had come across X-rays in my mother's house, and Colin suggested maybe it would be a good idea to contact the anatomy department in Trinity and see if they would be of any use. But I went in to meet Philomena, who's the technical officer in there, and while I was in there, she said, "Oh, you know, your man's next door in the cold room." And it hits you that she's still around. She's not with us anymore in spirit, but she's certainly with us in body, and she's still teaching away as she would like to have done, I think, you know. I discovered that the anatomy department was not in the place that I thought it was, and I had been tipping my hat and blessing myself past the wrong building for the last year and a half, so now I know where to tip my hat and to bless myself.
We moved into our new building in TBSI in 2011. As a link to the old building, we brought over our Irish giant Cornelius McGrath. He represents the old anatomy, and also he's here to link with the new building.
He died in 1760, and the story is, you know, the students here robbed his body, got him quickly back to the anatomy department where he was dissected very quickly. So when the family came knocking in the door, they said, too late, that's all happened already. Cornelius, I think, does represent to us here a very old history of anatomy of that time of grave robbing and, you know, disrespect for the poor and people who had very little and who were mainly the people used for dissection. It wasn't a particularly good thing in those times to be coming to an anatomy department.
Burke and Hare in Edinburgh, they weren't body snatchers. They skipped at that part. They went straight to actually killing people to pass the body on to the anatomist in the Edinburgh School of Medicine. When that was exposed, that caused a lot of uproar.
The medical profession at the time, including James McCartney, who was the professor of anatomy here in Trinity, were very worried about the bad reputation anatomists were getting.
He made a pledge called the Dublin Pledge, which we have actually in our department here. And it was an attempt to show that now we are going to move away from the grave robbing and we're moving into the time for people to donate to medical science. And he got more than 300 signatures on this Dublin Pledge.
It's in 1832 with the passage of the Anatomy Act, whereby it's not just executed felons who are being dissected, but those who die in poverty and who cannot afford a pauper's burial. Their body isn't their own property.
In reality, a large number of the donors were not necessarily voluntary donors. They were often, but not exclusively, people who were in the care of the state, living in poor houses, etc., or people who had no next of kin, and the parish was responsible for burying them.
particularly in Victorian culture, but a funeral was the ultimate mark of respectability. I mean, today people still talk about having the money to be buried. And after 1832, friendly societies and various different organisations, for example, the Dublin Firemen's Friendly Society created a burial club where you paid in every week. And this arose as a result of the Anatomy Act, whereby you had the poor actually insuring themselves against dissection, almost. A German historian working on the anatomy records for Ireland has discovered that approximately 80% of those bodies who were dissected across Ireland came from workhouses and lunatic asylums. In the 19th century, the picture of Ireland was of one of deep misery and poverty, and there was a population of, after the famine, approximately 6 million. I mean, it continues to go down, but the majority of people, particularly from the London perspective, were seen to live in vast poverty. The potential supply of poor bodies to be dissected in Dublin and the anatomy schools throughout Ireland meant that Ireland could potentially become a world leader in terms of anatomy lessons.
Those days are well and gone. It has been many, many years now since cadavers were accepted without the express consent in writing of the individual themselves.
When it became very common and they were using lots of bodies, well, then the universities became more unsure and were inclined to distance themselves from the anatomical school. So, for instance, when the anatomical school in Trinity was built in 1824, that was surrounded by a wall to keep it away from the rest of the college, and it was built at the eastern side of the college ground, far away from the front of college. The medical students were not allowed to walk through the college properly. They had to go in and out through a back way. The gate was only open for a very short period during the day. Very few of the non-medical staff of the university would ever have been in this park, even though it's quite a beautiful building.
Do you remember these?
Yes. I was going to come out and
that's right.
Yes.
At the dissecting tables, we were supposed to be able to demonstrate the anatomy and the relationships of various organs and so on to the students. And we were also studying for our primary fellowship of the College of Surgeons.
Coming in here, all I remember is the smell of the formalin and being around the place.
But I think in a room at the back here, there was a storage area, and as my memory serves me, and that's where the donors' bodies were kept until they were needed for the next dissection year.
They were anonymous. We didn't know anything of them or of the background that I'm aware of. Certainly they were not named. When one came in here, yes, people were talking and giggling and that, but it was almost like being in church. There was that kind of respectful silence most of the time.
I was so thrilled, really, to be in the presence of the actual human body and to learn from it.
You find that you really need to be with the cadavers to study and learn what is supposed to be, because that's the only place you can learn it without endangering human life, so that by the time you then come to operate, you find that you have a very good idea, you've seen it before.
I have gone back to the anatomy department regularly when it's looking at a new procedure or a modification of a procedure to look at the relationships of muscles as one makes an approach to a deep structure. Anatomy did not finish for me as a demonstrator of anatomy the first year after I qualified. It's something that I've come back to over and over the years.
Apart from being a medical student in Trinity and then demonstrating anatomy, both my parents-in-law donated their bodies to Trinity, and for a while both of their bodies were still with the department. That's no longer the case, but my mother-in-law's body is still with the department. So yeah, it's been a full circle for me from starting as a medical student to being in this position now.
Absolutely. So can you show me the extensors of the wrist?
We're looking at the posterior compartment. So these would be the extensor digitorum running here. There's also an extensor for the index finger and the little finger. So extensor indices and extensor digiti minimi as well.
We had to extend the arm because we wanted to use the anterior part of the forearm. So we extended it, and I kind of grabbed the hand and moved it out, and then I realised, whoa, it was, Joe, you're used to giving handshakes and you're used to everything with your hand kind of with someone else. It's always an intimate thing, you know, if you're touching someone on the shoulder saying well done, and you're kind of just, you're holding his hand and you're just like, whoa, this is a little bit weird.
I remember I saw on one of the donors there was a mark left from a wedding ring. So that definitely hit home for me that this was someone's husband or wife, and it was difficult to dissect the hands. I actually didn't do it myself because I didn't really want to, because they are much more personal. I remember being on the phone to my mum that night, and I was like, Mum, I can't do this. I wanted to leave. I was like, I can't. This is someone's family member. It's not fair, you know. But when I thought about it properly, they really did want to do this, and for me to become a good doctor, I have to do this. So it's part of the process.
Lovely, and it's lovely and separated there, so it's really easy to pick out where flexor is. So can you...
In our tradition there, we usually try to preserve our body. We want to keep like a full body, and so that when we are in our next life, the so-called next life, you will, you know, be like a normal person, like not without an eye or something. That's why in our medical schools in Malaysia, there's like no donor body. Like literally, there's only one cadaver for like 6,000 people, and it's even plasticized. It's completely dissected, so everyone's just there to take a look at it. And there's even a distance, like safety distance, do not get close. So the fact that we get to work with these donors is like, and it's really a privilege.
Okay. Yeah. So that's extension, flexion. Show me opposition. Yeah, and then excellent. So
what all that actually has been saying is like, keep up, because we have to be in the foot by Christmas. So, you know, by Christmas we should have got like the limbs done, and then I think afterwards we start to move into more like organs and intestines and trunk, all that kind of stuff.
When Harry died, I was asked by the family to say something at the funeral. So really I reflected on his life of giving in so many ways, and his life of recycling. He was the kind of prototype. I stopped a bit short of the ultimate recycling. But you know what I did say at that time was that Harry's life was not defined by the things that he did. It was defined by who he was, and his identity, as I think most of our family would think, our identity is in Christ, not by what we do, but we see ourselves where we are in life because of him.
I don't know about the motivation for Gran and Grandad, but I think a reason for not having a problem with donating their body, or their bodies not being nervous about it, I think was a view of death, a calmness about death.
I feel that once my parents died, they were gone to be with Jesus, and that they were no longer in the body. The body was empty. You know, their soul had gone, and therefore I was happy to release the body to science and to be of help to somebody. And you know, really proud of them that they were prepared to do that.
Throughout her life, she was concerned with helping others, and it was just a natural extension that when she knew that she was going to die, that the final thing that she could do to help others would be to donate her body to Trinity. Well, I think if you're an atheist, one of the things obviously that you have to think through is what happens when you die. And I think the natural conclusion, if you understand science, if you understand that we are animals in the same way as other animals are animals, you know, we don't think something extraordinary or mystical happens when, you know, a beetle dies or a cat dies. And it's the same with us. We just recognise when we're dead, we are the same as we were before we were born. What it does is it makes you appreciate the time that you have more, because it's not a rehearsal for some sort of eternal afterlife. You know, this is what it is. And particularly so when, like, after Anne was diagnosed and we were told that she had 6 months, I mean, it ended up, she lasted for a year and a half. But when you have that specific amount of time and you know that that's it, then you really appreciate it, and you live every day, you know, much more intensely and with a much greater appreciation of the fact that you are here. You know, I miss her every day, you know, particularly, I mean, even here, like this couch, I miss her when I'm watching television, because we spend so much time watching those box sets of DVDs and things when she was ill. You know, I miss her, you know, when I go to bed, I miss her. You know, we were together 25 years, so I mean, it's not something that you know, that I'm ever going to stop missing her.
I think a lot of people think when you donate to medical science that they come here and that seems to be the end of it. I mean, you know, they don't actually ever ask the question hardly, you know, what happens next.
So what's that going to be? Is that cremation?
Cremation.
24th
May. It's a difficult time for families, and they've always said that to us over the years, and getting the letter can sometimes make them feel, oh, I can't believe it's 3 years.
Cremation?
Burial in the college plot. Friday the 7th of June.
I think her daughter, that woman's daughter, is coming over from the UK with her grandchildren, so cremation.
Cremation, and it's at 2:30. Now this one is no response whatsoever from these people. No response.
They haven't even acknowledged that we've sent the letter out.
No, left a message on the answer machine, posted letter, etc. No response.
They're in the UK, aren't they?
Yeah, they're both in the UK.
Should we ring them?
I think we should.
Yeah, I think it might be worth giving them a call. It's just that you know, when you've no response at all, you don't know what's going to happen.
I'm afraid
you don't know if they've received the letter. They may have moved house.
No, it's not.
It's the answering machine again, is it, Philomena?
Yeah. Hello, this is Philomena and Siobhan phoning from Anatomy in Trinity. We're just interested to know, did you get the forms about the burial of your aunt this coming June? If you could please contact us or contact Corrigan and Sons, our undertakers, to arrange for the burial this coming June. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, well, hopefully they'll get that.
Please have left a message.
Yeah.
We've moved into the trunk, really. So we've looked at the thorax, so the lungs, the heart, and we're into the abdomen, so the gut, the GI tract, the kidneys, the liver, all that kind of, the viscera of the body. It's almost more human, if you know what I mean, because they're recognisable organs, you know, their hearts, their lungs, their livers, they're things that keep you alive.
It's been so repetitive, we've been in there so many times that it's just normal, you know, just go in, go out. There's no more of that kind of, you know, slightly taken aback anymore. Okay, sometimes like when we pulled out like the heart, that's like, that was a beating heart like years ago for however old the person was beating for so long, and now it's just there for us to look at. But that, you know, just those aspects just brought me back a bit, but it wasn't half as bad as the start of the year.
You get to know them top to toe, everything in between. You get to see not only the exterior markings of what's happened to them over the course of their life, but interior. So, you know, if someone's a smoker, you do see that inside them. Even someone who's lived in a city all their life, as opposed to someone who's lived in a country, you'll see black accumulations in their lungs.
It's crazy, like you don't think how complicated your body is until you actually see it, and you see all this stuff and then you realise, oh my God, this is happening inside me as well.
And it's really exciting then to move around to other benches and to kind of see what they've discovered, and also like working into especially the heart. We've gotten to see stents and filters and little devices, pacemakers, things like that, that are left in for like our learning experience. So it's like a discovery every time you go for a new organ.
We had one stomach and it was tiny, and I was like, that's not the stomach, is it? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, what? Because a lot of them are much bigger, you know, you wouldn't believe the variation. So we got to see so much variation between the different donors.
Everybody has a bit of a romantic idea of going into medicine, we're going in to help people, but there is a gory reality to it all too. And you have to be tough in lots of ways. You have to be tough to deal with that, sure, but tough to deal with illness that you can't treat, that patients won't all survive. Obviously, we can't all live forever. Dealing with breaking bad news to patients and all of that. So it's all a sort of a, it doesn't all happen all at once. It's a gradual indoctrination or learning process. We still go back and do anatomy courses in particular areas. You have to know what the normal looks like before you can deal with the abnormal or restore the normal in somebody who's been injured. Anatomy is key to plastic surgery for many aspects. And you do forget it if you're not using it. It's better.
Anatomy was very important because it led to the development of cardiology, and it also had a huge impact on the development of scientific thought and science and medicine. It led to an understanding of pathology also, that they began to move from dissecting people just to find out what was the structure of the body to dissecting people to find out what they died from.
Perhaps less thought of is the fact that fine artists often do drawing classes in dissecting rooms. And I think clear examples of that are the way that Vesalius and Leonardo da Vinci dissected human bodies and produced studies of them without their skin on it, showing how well they understood the musculature of the body.
Indeed, artists attended many of the anatomical schools. For instance, there was quite a good school in Cork, a private school run by a man called Woodruff. One of the big Irish painters of the 19th century, Daniel MacLeish, whose Strongbone Eva hangs in the National Gallery, and Hogan, the Irish sculptor, whose works are all over the city and all over the country. They attended dissections under Woodruff in the anatomy school.
very welcome to the station because it just gives you a brief overview of the anatomy.
The use of donating a body is also for postgraduate science. Everybody possibly thinks when the body's donated, it's given for the purpose of undergraduate teaching a medical student. There's no medical students here. These were 65 doctors from around the world who are either in training or who are already trained consultants.
Focusing on the neurovascular bundle that exits out from the pelvis and into the thigh.
There is 6 donors in this room who will be interred quite soon, but their last piece of work is actually providing the material for these gynecologists here to work on and to learn from. Dissections have been done showing very small parts of pelvic anatomy, and our donors are actually providing that for the people who are coming in from all over the world, actually, that are coming specifically to Trinity and to this facility here to learn from our donors.
If we've reflected all those muscles back, that gives us a view of the obturator canal.
You know, I think cadavers are the gold standard. I think they always will be. To date, I don't think that there's anything that really compares to cadaver tissue in terms of realistic tissue, in terms of realistic anatomy. There's just nothing that you can create that's synthetic that can compare to cadaver tissue.
Horizontally out from. There's a lot of people who will operate on live patients but don't really get to see the applied anatomy of that. What this gives is a facility for training. We do have simulators, we do have 3D, but there's nothing like looking at a live specimen or a cadaveric specimen to see where the actual nerves are, where the veins are. If we are doing surgical dissection, if we are putting in prosthesis, if we are putting in needles, we want to know that we can avoid complications. We feel for the guitar string feel of the insertion of the adductor longus tendon. As you know, that's a very strong tendon, as Claire says, inserted just below the...
You can look at many of the practices that we are now accept as being safe practices and look at the reduction in complications that have happened in most surgical techniques over the years, and you can see how very important the anatomical sciences will have been in creating those procedures and progressing them to the point where they are safe and can be undertaken. So donors most definitely save lives.
So the muscles in this lady are relatively small. So just to point that out. Yeah, there's a nice variation on the donor over here.
It's all about acknowledging the families and the donor. I read a lot of old history articles on anatomy, and it's all about the surgeons and physicians who became so famous. But there's never any mention of the donor that they learned from.
We gather here this evening to remember and to give thanks. We remember those who, through the gift of themselves, have enabled the healing of many, many others.
Dad is very passionate about wanting to donate his body, and that was the time where I really realised how much it meant to the college, to the medical students, and why he always wanted to do it. He wasn't a religious man. He had his own beliefs, which were quite different. And he believed in reincarnation. And I think he really wanted to be useful in the education sense. And that's what makes me proud, that he's wherever he is, looking down and going, yes, I'm being of value.
One breath apart. You came to take me for a walk with you. I was afraid at first to meet you, to take your hand.
It was a lovely poem by one of the students. They were walking down this path in studying, and then in encountering the body, and how the donor took her hand in going through all her studies, and suddenly they were, side by side, and she wasn't fearful then.
Then I saw your face, and I knew you came to take me for a walk with you.
Losing somebody close to you, no matter what age, it's still a hole in your life that takes time to fill.
The donors were my teachers, as clearly as any other. Their teaching was silent, but their wisdom endless. Studying these bodies provided an opportunity which enhanced my education.
You know, it was very, very personal in the way that you think it's especially for you. You know, it's especially remember your relative. It was very nice in a way that the students expressed their appreciation of what we've done. I had the feeling that she was there, and I was thinking she would have loved being there. She would have loved that mass.
And listen to the music, and it was a lovely, lovely ceremony.
I think that the ceremony, this American word closure, you know, but it does actually do that. It really, and it's very emotional. It was very emotional for me, and I didn't expect it to be. It gives you time to pause, think about the person a year and a half later. And I think whenever we've opted to get ashes back, and I think whenever that comes, that'll be another chance to pause and think about Dad.
I often go up the stairs and I go into the room and I know she's still there. I know she's still there. I know she's still here in the house.
You go to station 1, you go to station 2 over here, and you go to station 3.
You have spot stations where there'll be either some osteology tested, or you might have individual organs, as in this semester.
What's the difference between small intestine and large bowel visually?
Well, you have generally 3 main things. You have the house dirt, or the saculations of the large, and then you'll also have the tinea coli, which are very
What are they,
thin.
the tinea coli?
They're very thin longitudinal muscles that run along and form the saculations.
Or you might have actually a donor laid out before you with a certain part exposed, and then there will be tags or pins in certain parts of them that will be identified. You walk around with a clipboard which will have your questions on it based on which station you're at, and then you will answer the questions based on the tags.
That's it. Yeah. Take the thing and pop along to the station down there. For
it is quite intense, like, because you've only got 3 minutes. You're trying to get as much information out and trying to put across what you know, which is a lot different from sitting writing an exam. Like.
Okay, so if that's cecum and appendix, what's this part?
It's going to be the descending colon.
Yeah.
Go in here to the sigmoid.
Sigmoid, and then we're into the pelvis there.
It's quite a stressful environment, just being under that time pressure and knowing like how important it is.
Now, Heather, it's part of the abdominal cavity. What major structure is that?
Small intestine.
That's small intestine in this.
And large. I suppose it's kind of, you're always going to be under pressure in your future career as a doctor, so it's something it needs to be done.
Are they free to move or not?
No, they are touched laterally and anteriorly.
It's very scary, but it goes so fast. Like, it's the fastest 15 minutes ever. Like, so quick. But once it's over, it's just so relieving.
Yeah, it's over. We're done. So yeah, I'm delighted to be finished, but it's crazy how fast the year went.
The exams are over. It's an amazing, relieving feeling.
It's one of those great times of the year. It's actually strange. You walk through campus differently.
It feels amazing, yeah. So free.
Very good. It is nice, yeah. Nice to not have to freak out about studying for exams anymore. But yeah.
Feels really good. Someone said to me the other day, we're 20% doctor, so faith in that.
The donor comes to the end of their journey in anatomy after being the silent teacher, helping with the exams. It's then time for the burials.
Anything from the donor is kept with the donor, and anything that comes from that donor is placed back in the coffin with the donor. That's great. The fact that coffins appear, I remember, I think the first time I saw coffins coming into the old dissection room, and I was kind of going, oh God, it's like there's 15 coffins here. It was like, you know, a scene from something. I mean, where do you go and see that number of coffins? Usually maybe it's a disaster that you see something like that.
I suppose indirectly every single one of us has this bond between us and the donor, and it's actually quite sad for me to say that, you know, like this is the practical exams the last time I'm going to, you know, actually see the donor.
You do forget sometimes that these were real people and that they had a family and that they'll have to go back now, you know, and just especially this time of the year, you know, you just kind of think, and you know, there is that sort of like, it's kind of like, it kind of sounds weird, but it's kind of saying goodbye in a way.
I kind of think of them as having their place in a way, and sorry, but it's just a little weird because you expect to see them, I think, and it'll be a bit strange because you have to kind of readjust to whoever they choose for you next year, but it'll be fine because we adjusted in the first place anyway in the first term.
I think it's nice for the families. You know, it's nice for them to finally be able to put their loved one at rest, and that maybe they feel kind of a sense of, I'm not sure, that they've made a difference, even the families, because it's hard for them as well. It's not just hard for the donor to donate, it's their families that are the ones that have to deal with it. And I feel like they've made a huge sacrifice for us, and we've benefited so much from it.
Lots of memories and that come flooding back, and that can be difficult for, you know, for the people that are left behind. With the distance, you know, of between a memorial service and the cremation, it can be very difficult. I felt that he was here with me all the time, and today is just a little hard because you're kind of saying goodbye, and at least that I'll have somewhere to go just special to me. I knew I could go into Trinity at any time, but I'm glad to have him back. After this, he'll be just in my thoughts and just with me.